Bloodstained. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. 4 years in the waiting, and I can finally review Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. For the uninitiated, this bad boy was developed by Iga himself, Mr. Koji Igarashi, the main man behind Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and just about every Castlevania game that played like Super Metroid. He launched a Kickstarter a stunning 4 years ago now, and while it was launched, it broke all kinds of records in terms of the amount of money that was raised, as well as how quickly it was raised. I'm not going to get into the whole debacle that followed, but basically the game has involved at least 5 developers, was delayed more times than I can count, and followed in the footsteps of the abysmal failure that was Mighty No. 9. Essentially, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Yet, here we are, 4 years later, and I just finished the game. And I am so pleased to report that if you loved Symphony of the Night back in 1997, you're going to adore this game. It truly feels like a spiritual successor to Symphony of the Night in every way possible. Although I have to mention, for better or worse. Okay, so let's get the bad out of the way right now. Ritual of the Night plays so much like one of Iga's Castlevania games that if you simply renamed Miriam Belmont, this could have been called Castlevania Ritual of the Night. That means you're not really going to see any of the evolution of the Metroidvania genre. And keep in mind that this is at a time when games like Hollow Knight, Time Spinner, The Messenger, etc. are easily available on your platform of choice. But does that bother you? If it does, well, you might find Bloodstained a bit behind the times. However, if that doesn't bother you and you really want a follow-up to Iga's formula, well, you've got it right here. The other thing that is somewhat so-so is what I call the Bloated Storyline. I'm not going to touch the story whatsoever here, but it's a lot more bloated than Dracula's Resurrected, and hey, you're a Belmont, go take him down. There's actual backstory here, and while I appreciate that, it's kind of told in an archaic way. Basically, it's told through the use of portraits and a lot of dialogue. And yes, the dialogue is spoken, which is great, but it just, I don't know, it feels really, really old just tapping away the action button as these actors slowly read their lines. Honestly, what happened to me is towards the end of the game, I just started skipping the dialogue altogether because I just was like, okay, enough. I want to get back to the action. Finally, we get to the graphics. And while they're certainly nice, they aren't anywhere near as impressive as they would be if they were in 2D. And I know it's pricey to do that, but if indie developers all over the world can do it, just imagine what Iga and his team could have done. Honestly, the graphics did grow on me by the end of the game, but I don't know, I found that there were a lot of areas that just lacked a certain amount of polish and kind of gave some areas this generic feeling. Miriam herself too looks fantastic, and the special effects from like weapons and shards, they're all superb. I also really love the fact that every time you change clothes or equipment, this is visualized on Miriam. So whatever you change, you actually see, and I love little touches like that. And I guess I did lie to you because there is one little bit more of bad news, and that comes from a game-breaking bug that was introduced in one of the game's very first patches. Now get this, it's basically called the treasure chest bug because it does one of two different things. One is it can rearrange some of the items in the chest, and another is it can actually have a chest open so that you just don't get any items, you're stuck. And so what really sucks with this is, let's say you had played the game for a few hours prior to this patch getting released, and then you downloaded the patch, your save file is essentially corrupted now, and you can't progress through the game. Your only choice is to restart the game, and that sucks. Now, thankfully, my code, I was a Kickstarter backer, and I asked for the PS4 download code. It was delayed by 24 hours after the game's release, and I'm actually thankful for that because I actually got to update the game before I played it, so I was safe. Now, I know what you guys are all thinking. You're like, that's a whole hell of a lot of negative. And, well, yes it is. But it's also a testament to the quality of the game that I actually put up with that, because everything else is exactly what I wanted. It really is. This truly is a brand new Castlevania game by the man who introduced the Metroidvania style to Castlevania. What you get here is a massive castle with loads of secrets and gameplay you're familiar with. You acquire new weapons to unlock new areas, backtrack to previously explored areas in order to use your new powers, to gain new techniques and equipment and more powerful items. The gameplay twist is essentially the exact same twist as Castlevania Area of Sorrow had, whereby you absorb souls, or in this case shards of enemies, and these shards allow passive skills such as increasing weapon damage of, say, like a sword, to directional projectile attacks, to the more common spell-based magical abilities, and so on and so forth. You can even get yourself a familiar to aid in battle, and so much more. Ritual of the Night also features two distinct crafting systems. One is for general item crafting such as food, weapons, gear, that kind of stuff. And the other one is for enhancing your shards. So this one is really interesting because, let's give you an example here. One shard might allow you to walk underwater. But at first you're going to move extremely slowly. As you enhance that shard though, essentially leveling it up, the ability to move in water gets more and more natural, making it so that it's almost as if you're walking outside of water. And this actually pertains to all the shards. And it's really cool, and it makes you want to go and pick up the different drops that enemies drop. And you don't really have to grind for them either, which I really liked. Even though there are some with like a 2% drop rate, I found within 5 minutes of just going back and forth in a room, I was able to get the item that I wanted. And I really appreciated this. You don't have to worry about grinding, even in general, so long as you go after the different quests, which are always the same thing. Go kill 5 of those monsters, or go get this piece of food for me, or something like that. As long as you do those, you'll be fine. You won't have to worry about grinding. And it wouldn't be a Castlevania game, I mean Bloodstained, if I didn't mention the boss fights. I'm pleased to report that some of the bosses from Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, the actual prequel to this game, the 2D prequel that Steven and I actually loved, they're actually featured in this game too, and it's wonderful seeing them represented in full screen 1080p glory. I should mention though that treasure or coin boss or whatever he is, he appears quite late in this game, and he brings the game's frame rate down to a halt for some very weird reason. Thankfully, the rest of the game runs relatively smoothly. There are a few dips in the frame rate here and there, but it's few and far between. And I didn't really experience any bugs outside of the occasional enemy drop getting stuck in the air, but nothing game-breaking, thank God. I also must mention the fact that the soundtrack is brilliant. It's just brilliant. Michiru Yamane, the composer of many Castlevania games, joined Iga for Bloodstained, and my god, her work here is just awesome. It really is. The gothic-inspired soundtrack's gonna have you humming away in no time. And while it's true that most of the tracks aren't as memorable as, say, Bloody Tears, they're still excellent in their own right. From the multitude of weapons to the dozens of secrets the castle has to offer to the hidden bosses and more, this is precisely the game I backed Iga and wanted him to make. While personally I would have preferred if the graphics were 2D, I honestly can't really complain since the game is what I asked for. This is a fantastic game and should be played by everyone who enjoys the Castlevania series. I can only hope and pray that Konami sees this game and realizes that there's a lot of love for their beloved franchise out there, and maybe one day they should make a new entry. But if not, we now have a replacement, and I hope this game sells well enough that we can get a follow-up to both it and Curse of the Moon, because now I want Bloodstained to stick around. It's great. Before closing out the review, I just want to make mention that I played the PlayStation 4 version of the game and no other version, so I do not know how the other versions handle, are optimized, etc. I do have a Switch version coming in, so if I get a chance, I will review that version of the game separately and talk about whether or not the optimization is ideal. Thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you in the next video.